Hello there, my crafty little buggers, and welcome to a double first timer for me. Why double? Well, it's the first time that I created an animated piece from scratch, and the first time that I'm doing a 3-part video explaining the whole process. This whole piece is a collaboration with my good friend Filip Melvan, the composer from Ghelfi Studios. Some of you might already know about Filip and Michael, but for those of you who don't, check the card in the upper right corner or the related links in the description. If you're new to this channel, I should introduce myself. People on the interwebs call me Crafty, hence the name of this channel. I'm a motion graphics designer working in marketing, but gaming being sort of my passion, I don't hesitate to throw myself onto projects like this, and I enjoy every single bit of it. So, if you're into photo manipulation, animation and occasional illustration, you might be interested in subscribing, since my content is all about that. Also, if you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and perhaps leave a comment if you feel like sharing your thoughts, suggestions and ideas with me. The whole project is called Endora Unleashed. It's mainly a steampunk themed music score, but we decided to work on it together to create a fully immersive experience with music, story and a cinematic to go along with it. And oh boy, it took its sweet time. I spent about 20 hours working on the photo manipulation and animation, excluding the render time, which took another 6 to 8 hours with some additional corrections and re-rendering. And I don't even want to talk about the amount of work that Filip had. I was literally worried about his well-being, and we sort of had the same feeling about the whole process. It seemed like it was never gonna end. At some point, the progress was so seemingly insignificant that we couldn't see the finish line. But it's finally done, and it's here for you to enjoy. This video is being released an hour after the album itself, so make sure to check the card in the upper right corner to listen to it, or simply follow the link from the description box. So this is how it's gonna go. Part 1, which you're watching right now, will be all about creating the floating city. Part 2 will explain the creation process behind the goddess Endora and the finishing touches to the photo manipulation. And finally, Part 3 will show you how to create a looping cinematic. So let's talk about a city. The most annoying thing about creating any photo manipulation is finding the proper assets, and as always, it takes its sweet time. Aside from my personal photos, I used images from pixabay.com, since they're free to use and I didn't want any copyright or intellectual property infringement issues with the original creators of the photos. After a thorough search and an insane amount of downloads, I started importing the various cityscapes and rendered 3D models into Photoshop. The first thing that I needed to take care of was the ground that the city would be placed on. I used some of the photos I took on a mountaineering trip a few years ago and created the basic outline and texture of the island. Once that was done, I needed to decide which part of the city from the photos I wanted to use, mask it out and finally scale it to size so it would fit the rest of the assets. To make the colors coherent, I imported the images of the sky and tried to match the rest of the scene to it, using curves since it was the easiest way for me to do that. In most of the cases, I didn't use the adjustment layers because every layer was set as a smart object, and that means that I can revisit the adjustment that I created at any point later on. I didn't do that much, but I did need to revisit some of the color corrections because, well, your eyes can play tricks on you if you're looking at the screen for too long. Speaking of assets, for the sake of architectural diversity, I intentionally used images from different parts of the world, mostly Western and Eastern Europe and Asia, as well as different levels of industrialization. That's because I imagined the city as a multicultural place, since it was supposed to be a prosperous scene of economy and trade. But diversity doesn't go in one direction, so I imagined the buildings to the very left of the floating island to be the slums, ruled by whoever resides in the castle placed in the mountain behind those buildings, and the part to the right to be reserved for the middle and the upper classes. The other castle, placed to the back of the central part of the island, would be the ruling figure behind the middle class, and whoever would live in the clock tower would be the ruler of the upper class and the whole island. Thus, I created some class segregation drama as an additional interest to the storyline. I introduced some construction sites to the whole scene, like the small castle on the top of the hill in front of the clock tower. I simply wanted to show that the city is alive and still growing. I also placed all the balloons and blimps around it for the same reason. The waterfall cascading down the edge of the island was just another touch to make the whole thing more lively and interesting, no more than that. I didn't think of a story behind it, but if you have some ideas, by all means, feel free to post them in the comment section below the video. The next thing to take care of was the mechanism behind the floating. I was thinking whether to make the island suspended on some chains attached to huge blimps, but that didn't seem like a good idea for the final product, since it had to look and feel as clear as possible. I also thought of having it magically raised in the air, but I finally decided to give it an engine and some exhausts because, well, steampunk. However, since the original story had some magic involved, I had the idea to introduce some type of magical, electrically charged smoke coming from the exhausts, and I think it fit very nicely and gave it some additional interest. Now, here's where I realized that the city looked a bit bland and flat, so I decided to take my smoke brush and create some separation between different layers of it. And that gave it some proper volume. It looked nice, but kinda empty, sort of lacking something. So a thought occurred to me. Why not give it some platforms? Create a dock for the blimps and the balloons. Or how about I create two docks? One to the right of the island looking big and prosperous, and the other one to the left in ruins, not even working. It felt like a nice little addition to the story, and another valid reason for some extra internal conflict on the island. After looking at the image for a while, I noticed that the city looked really small. I was paying so much attention to the small details that I completely missed the bigger picture. So I enlarged it by some 20%, and it was finally time to move on to creating the goddess Endora. Therefore, make sure to subscribe to this channel so as not to miss the part 2 of the photo manipulation process coming next week. Also, I would appreciate it if you'd give this video a thumbs up, perhaps leave a comment and give me your insights or some new ideas on how to expand the story or what I could have done differently. Until next time, this is Crafty, and I bid you farewell.